The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Cities and Seattle, Washington. This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Out as our Seattle correspondent is Ben Remington.
Hello,
Ben. That's a bold move to plant yourself in the Seattle area and be the Seattle NHL team correspondent for this podcast.
Yeah. I'm trying to get in on the ground level here. See if I can, become a super famous beat writer by covering a team that doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah. Hey, whatever works, I guess. We're not getting anywhere in this market, so.
That's painfully true.
How is Seattle? And you're out at the Pike Place Market yesterday and seeing the sights. You checking out a baseball game?
Yeah, going to a Mariners game on Tuesday when they're in town. We went to Pike Place Market and checked that out. I saw the gum wall, which is one of the most disgusting things I think I've ever seen. Did you see that when you were here?
I did not.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's like at the base level of Pike Place Market, and it's they call it the gum wall, but it's an alley that is like beneath Pike Place, and like both sides of the alley. The walls are entirely covered in used gum.
That's disgusting.
It is really disgusting, yeah. But it's, it's a touristy type kitschy thing. Went down on the piers, ate some seafood yesterday, and enjoyed some Capitol Hill nightlife last night. So it's been good.
Well, there you go. I spend most of my time in Seattle salivating over Ken Griffey Jr., so...
I'll definitely get that in on Tuesday. We'll head to the ballpark early, and we'll take it all in.
I'm sure you'll make me very jealous by sending me pictures of the Ken Griffey Jr. statue.
Probably, yes.
All right, so it was not an overly great news week for the Minnesota Wild, so this isn't going to be an overly long podcast. We do have a guest, Jeremy Gover of the Nashville Predators radio network, going to join us a little bit later, talk about the Preds, who are still playing in the playoffs, and talking about their assistant general manager, Paul Fenton, who was in the news this week. But first, before we get to that, was there any thoughts left over from Monday you had? Because I have a grind my gears that's kind of
fitting
related to Monday and whatnot.
No, I think we got it all out on that podcast, and I don't have any. I think we tried to get most of it all out on Monday's podcast. I think that was a pretty good coverage of our reaction to Fletcher's firing. But as the week goes along, like the more I wrote an article about making some Wild trades, burning the Wild down, and it helped me. It furthered my belief that it's going to be a really, really tough job to get this hockey team where everybody wants it to be, essentially. Like it's not as, there were so many people that had so much vitriol for Chuck Fletcher that thought that, he was the problem why they weren't, advancing further in the playoffs. But I don't want to disrespect any general manager before they even come in, but I think it's going to be very, very hard for the next general manager to do better than he did, just based on how this team is constructed. And yeah, Fletcher's to blame for a little bit of that, but the Parise Suter contracts, I think, are, kind of the crux of that. So
my grind my gears or actually before I get to that, I didn't say this on Monday, but I just want to warn people that, good NHL managers don't grow on trees. So when I fired off the tweet about Chuck Fletcher coming in, taking a roster that, had nothing and turned it into a team that made the playoffs 6 straight years, I think my point was, I probably didn't do a good job of saying it, but, change needed to be had, but I say so while I'm, wincing, because
right,
there are a lot of NHL general managers out there that I don't want,
right,
or you would hate to have, and they are bad, and you would take Chuck Fletcher over that person 10 out of 10 times. Like Chiarelli, Snow, like these are guys who just come to the top of your head. And so I just say, like,
Jim Benning.
Well, a change was needed. Like, there's a warning that comes with it that, you may not get something better, but
right,
you had to make the change as we said. But my grind my gears for this week is,
You know what really grinds my gears?
I checked out a Twitter over the weekend for more reasons than one, but the endless conspiracy theories involving Ryan Suter on this hockey team is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think, as it's been kind of hinted at, that maybe he was in Craig Leopold's ear and, saying maybe there needs to be a change. And, our friend Tony from Hockey Wilderness said, if Craig Leopold asked some players what they thought, like, why wouldn't you? Like,
right.
Especially players like Suter, Parise, who have heavily invested in this team for a long period of time. And I think what we see on this team, and I think we see it in the NHL a lot nowadays, is NHL players have more say in hockey decisions. They're not just the sit down and be quiet type like you used to see in the 70s and 80s and let the executives make all the decisions. And when we get glimpses of that seems to bring out the old-time hockey crowd who doesn't like that. And they're the same people who hates when a player shows personality.
Right.
When anytime you get the rare instance of an NHL player like PK Subban or, Alex Ovechkin showing a glimpse of personality, something this league horribly needs, they get frowned upon. They get dumped on. And I hate that culture of hockey where you just need to be quiet. No. Let the players show personality. And yeah, players big like that are heavily invested in big decisions like Craig Leopold made. And you see it in, other sports like basketball. It's much easier to ask, LeBron, what he thinks on the Cavaliers rather than, risk losing LeBron. But I guess, I don't know. I'm sick of the conspiracy theories. Let's cut that out.
And I think especially with this decision, it was extra ridiculous.
It just seems like useless noise. Like, we sit here, we get so worked up about, the possibility of Ryan Suter, maybe saying, hey, yeah, maybe it is time for a change, and and maybe that speaks to the fact that maybe the players didn't have the confidence in Fletcher to make the moves necessary anymore.
Right.
Maybe that's what's buried in there is, when the players lose confidence in, a coach or their general manager, you're going to get results like what we got out of the Wild. And if we all needed a change, why are you mad that Ryan Suter helped facilitate that change?
Right.
That's it. I'm done.
No, I agree 100%. It'd be one thing if well, a lot of people are critical of LeBron James because they think he might get coaches fired or players traded that maybe isn't the best move for the team or whatever. But in this situation, it was like this is what the team needed, and this is what everyone agreed the team needed. And so, if you're going to go to Ryan Suter and ask him his opinion, he's going to get or if he gives you his opinion, it's no different than you and I giving an opinion on the matter, or Russo writing an article about it. And like, it's really weird because the same people that are pissing and moaning about the Suter thing were the people that wanted Chuck Fletcher gone the most. Right. It's like suddenly you're upset about how it went down. Like, you would have given your firstborn child to get Chuck Fletcher fired a month ago. And now that it actually happened, now you're concerned with the process? Like, who cares how Leopold came to that decision? It was the right decision, and everyone agrees it was the right decision. Even ardent Fletcher defenders agree it was the right decision. And it's so silly. Like, it's just being outraged for the sake of being outraged. Like, oh, what can I not exactly agree with now? It's you're absolutely right. It's just that, God forbid, hockey players, show some kind of investment with their team, especially, hockey players that sign 13-year, like basically double max contracts with this team. Like, I don't know. Do I want Ryan Suter making coaching decisions? No, we don't want him making coaching decisions because we don't believe they're best for the team. I mean, Ryan Suter should have played with Matt Dumba all season long. And it's bullshit that he called his shot and demanded to be with Spurgeon all season long. I mean, that's the kind of stuff to get upset about. But when, he's giving input on something where everyone else is in agreement on it, then what does it matter?
Like I said, I just kind of shut down Twitter for the weekend and just to get away. And it's refreshing to do that. And you and I kind of take more of that in the summer when all the hockey folks go into the cabins and whatnot.
Yeah, right. But the holiday.
It's tiring, and I hope there's a bit more news this next week to kind of get us out of Ryan Suter conspiracy theory Twitter. But just not
and if people
pleasant.
really believe that Ryan Suter was like the reason that Fletcher was fired, I mean, get real. Ryan Suter alone convinced Craig Leopold. Like, Craig Leopold had the extension printed out, just needed signature on it, and Ryan Suter made a phone call and ended it all. I mean, give me a break.
When he said it in the news conference on Monday that his antenna's been up really all year, and he kept an open dialogue with Chuck, and typically you don't see general managers go into the last year of their contracts like Chuck Fletcher did.
The fact that he wasn't extended before this season should have told you something.
Yeah. So that shows you that Craig Leopold was hesitant, and he said it wasn't the first round exit to Winnipeg, but this wasn't a decision that Ryan Suter just made in the last 2 weeks.
No.
I don't know. That's
so silly.
It just kills me. Like, let's have a few more rational thoughts. But so my other question I have is, we didn't really maybe hit on this on the Monday show, but is Craig Leopold maybe killing potential general manager candidates by saying, no, this team doesn't need a tear it down kind of a path? Like, is he kind of hamstringing himself? Because, what if a general manager comes in and, he wants to say, hey, let's, we got to maybe take a few steps back and trade some key players, and it might involve missing the playoffs for a year or two. But instead, Craig Leopold has already said, hey, we're just needing some tweaks. We're still a good team. We can still win the cup in the next 3 to 4 years. And I'm going to be very forward with that. And any general manager trying to come in for this position knows that, this team isn't going to go on to rebuild.
I don't know that it's really hurting the candidates all that much, because I think that if a candidate comes in and says, he'd like to make trades where it's kind of like one step back, two steps forward kind of thing. Because Leopold, when he said 3 to 4 years, and I know you don't exactly buy that, and I don't blame you, I think that allows for some time like that. But what he doesn't want is a complete, tear down, full on tanking kind of rebuild. And that's totally fine. I don't think any general manager worth his salt is going to come into the team and think that team needs this. So I don't think that they'll be limited in making some bold moves just because they absolutely 100% have to make some bold moves. So I'm not as worried about it. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think you want to limit anybody, to do anything at their particular job. But in this situation, I don't think it's going to affect anything that much because no general manager, you couldn't even really pull off a rebuild with this team because of Prezi, Suter, Koivu, et cetera. I mean, so many things are bolted down to this team that you really couldn't start a full-on earnest rebuild for probably 3 or 4 seasons, quite honestly. And even then you've got Ryan Suter and Zach Parise on a team that's trying to tank. And it's just like, I don't know how well that's going to work. And then you end up with them wanting to be moved and not really being able to be moved. And then you end up putting yourself in a salary cap hell because you're retaining a ton of salary, or God forbid they have to retire and you've got recapture penalties. Like, I don't think that that's a smart move either. So,
and here's the thing about tearing it down and rebuilding. The Vancouver Canucks have been rebuilding for a couple of years now. And I think it was Dim Filipovic. He tweeted after the draft lottery that the Vancouver Canucks have the most losses in the NHL the last 3 years. And they've never drafted higher than 5th.
Yep, I saw that.
And then you look at a team like the Winnipeg Jets, who outside of Patrick Laine never had a high draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to draft really good players like Ehlers and Connor with the picks that they had. And I think this more speaks to the fact that the Wild scouting department needs an overhaul.
Yep.
And you would like to think that a new general manager will make those changes because these are the same guys basically who were here for Risebrough, and we know how not good those draft results were. And while the Wild
it's been the same archetype of player. I mean, it's been the classic two-way forwards, skating defenseman type of thing. I mean, with few exceptions, obviously.
Right, and while they've had some good draft picks of Granlund, Dumba, Brodin early in Chuck Fletcher's tenure, they have really kind of swung and missed in recent years. And then they traded Alex Tuck, who's having an incredible season for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Right.
And, did somebody maybe suggest drafting Brock Besser over Joel Eriksson Ek? Like, imagine what this team could have done with a goal scorer like Brock Besser. Something that this franchise has been eluded of since Marin Gabrick left. I would hope that, a GM comes in and interviews, and the one that says, I'm going to kind of bring an overhaul to the scouting department and focus on draft and development, it would be the one that ultimately gets hired. And that segues almost perfectly into our next topic, as interviewees for the general manager position started to leak out here during the week. The first of which on Wednesday was Paul Fenton of Nashville. He's the assistant general manager, been with the Preds for 18 years and has been the assistant GM since 2006. Had a big hand in their player personnel before he got bumped up to the assistant general manager role, or I should say, like director of player development, kind of like a Brad Bombardier kind of a position.
Right.
And he's been pretty instrumental in the drafts for the Predators. Their AHL team, Milwaukee's also had pretty good success. And he is, as reported by just about any major outlet, the front runner for this position.
Right.
So do you have any thoughts on Paul Fenton? And we're going to talk to Jeremy Gover, our guest, about that in a little bit. But do you have any thoughts on him?
No, but I think it's a good hire just in that, it's tricky to hire an assistant GM because you don't know how much he's been involved, compared to, obviously David Pioli is got a lot of power there, but, you don't know how much credit to give a guy like Fenton for Nashville's success. You know what I mean? But you have to like what you've seen out of Nashville. Like, they said yes to the PK Subban trade, which I don't know that anybody can really give anyone credit for that, but at least nobody was dumb enough to say no. You know what I mean? So, but you don't know if that was a situation where Fenton had to talk Pioli into it, or Fenton disagreed with it and Pioli said yes. So it's really tough to kind of measure, what to tie to Fenton versus the front office in Nashville as a whole. But you have to like what Nashville's done. They had Seth Jones fall in their lap, and they had the balls to trade him for Ryan Johansson. That's been a big part of their success. Eli Tolvainen is a great example of Nashville making a draft pick that a lot of teams wouldn't necessarily make. Tolvainen was a supremely talented player that got, had lost his scholarship at Boston, at BC, because of academics, and so he slipped in the draft. But Nashville said we're taking him, and he tore up the KHL this year, and he's probably going to be a good NHL player. So you really like what you see out of everything going on in Nashville. It's tough to really 100% attribute it to either Fenton or Pioli, but at the very least, he's coming out of an organization that knows what success looks like, knows what they have to do to get on top and stay on top.
Other candidate is reported over the weekend by Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic, TSN. Bill Zito, Assistant General Manager, Columbus Blue Jackets, interviewed with Craig Leopold and Matt Maka, President, at some point here over the week. Those are the only two candidates that have really been reported as getting interviews. It does sound like the Wild will want a swift process because Leopold is going to have, I believe, hip surgery at the end of this next week.
Yeah.
So they would like to have it wrapped up by then. So I got to imagine they'll maybe have another interview or two. But if Paul Fenton is as the front runner as everyone's reporting, then it'd be pretty hard for me and you to. It'd be pretty hard to imagine if me and you get together next week for a new podcast and we're not talking about Paul Fenton as the new GM.
Yeah, and Leopold's roots in Nashville, obviously, make that, almost a slam dunk, like you're saying.
Yeah, and like I said, he's been there 18 years, and that obviously stretches back to Craig Leopold when he was the owner, and
right.
He drafted guys like Pekka Rinne and Shea Weber and Ryan Suter, and more recently Roman Josi, and as you said, Eli Tolvainen, and done good work under David Poyle. So, any thoughts on other GM candidates? Like I jokingly put out there our crystal ball article from Puck Daddy from when we looked at Pierre Maguire, but is there anyone else I guess you'd like to see get an interview? Because I guess other candidates could include like Bill Guerin, Chris Pronger. Brent Flair is obviously on the list, but it's hard to see that happening at this point. And maybe even Dean Lombardi.
I have nothing against Brent Flair. I don't want to see it for obvious reasons because, in order to make a change, you actually have to make a change. And Brent Flair is obviously, the continuation of the Fletcher era, essentially. So I have nothing against him, and I wish him all the best and all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing with Chuck Fletcher. Like, I think you did a fine job, but it's just time for something new, and I'm sure Brent Flair will land on his feet. There's a lot of positive things out there about him, but I'd just rather not see him. Sure, give him an interview if you want to. It's probably a good experience for him, but I don't want to see them seriously considering somebody who was a Fletcher regime person.
Just reading on Paul Fenn and how he spent a lot of time and player development and doing a lot of great work in that area. And as we'll talk to Jeremy Gover in a minute, obviously maybe had some hands in the big trades that Nashville has made, as you said.
Right.
It's hard not to like this guy because player development is an area the Wild badly need a change at. Something that needs to get better. Because when you're picking late in the first round every year for making the playoffs, you gotta hit home runs with these picks, and they haven't, and the Wild are suffering. And as I'm going to write on Zone Coverage this week, the Wild have a very small window to win, as Craig Leopold said. It's even smaller than what he put out. So player development will be a huge key in keeping that window open. Maybe getting a player from the KHL that's highly coveted over here would help that too, but there's a very small window for this team to win with all the players getting older and contracts expiring and whatnot. So I will leave it at that. Look for that this week on Zone Coverage, but for now we will chat with our guest, Jeremy Gover. All right, joining us on the Giles and the Goalie podcast, he covers the Nashville Predators on the Predators radio network. He is Jeremy Gover. Jeremy, how's it going today?
Giles, how are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I guess my first question for you is, what's it like to play hockey past the first round? I don't quite have a concept being somebody who covers the Wild here.
You'll know soon enough, I'm sure. It's a very interesting feeling, actually, because as you know, the Predators in their franchise history hadn't gone to the second round until 2010, I believe. It was 2011, 2010. Sorry, and so it's newfound success for the market, I think, to go to the second round, and then of course last year's amazing run to the final was obviously new territory as well, and the Preds are hoping to get back there. But as far as like the emotion of going to the rink, in May, and and hopefully early June, it's quite interesting because usually during the season, you maybe watch a Wild game or whatever team you're interested in, and then during the intermission maybe you switch over to another game, or when that game's over you then click over to maybe a West Coast game, something like that. And this is the time of year where that doesn't always happen, and so it's very odd when you kind of feel like you're on an island. But it's a good island, obviously. It's an island chock full of whatever your favorite food and drink is.
When you mentioned how incredible the Predators have done here in the last really calendar year, I guess for somebody who's covered the team as closely as you do, what really has the last year been like with the Predators being the center of the hockey universe?
Intently focused. What I mean by that is the team, last year, they wanted to win. Obviously, every team does, and they in a way expected to win. But now they have the confidence that they can win. They have the experience that they've been there and done that. They know what it takes. They know that they can't get too high after losses. Or too high after wins, too low after losses. Kind of keep things even keel. We even had there was a great story on The Athletic, I think a couple days ago, about how Pecorine learned from last year's experience, even though he did so well, right? Short of maybe the 2 out of the 3 games in Pittsburgh, he did so well the whole campaign, the whole postseason campaign, but that he learned to say no to people when they wanted things, whether it be friends coming from out of town or media requests or whatever it was, right? He learned to say no because eventually it caught up with him, or eventually he didn't know how to kind of manage his time. And it's so funny how we as fans and media, we watch the games, we go, okay, well, if they play this defense better, and if they play this kind of game, and if they can match the speed of Team X, and then they'll be competitive. Well, we kind of forget about all the other stuff that's outside that factors into that. And that was just a great example. And it wasn't even a major part of the Athletics piece. It was just an interesting part to me that really kind of took me aback, because I was like, well, yeah, they would have that kind of roller coaster the first time to the Stanley Cup final, and then why would they know? Why would they think it'd be any different than what they've experienced before? And now they know that it's different. So now they know that okay, 5 to 6 minutes post game with each reporter, get out. Eat the right kind of foods, and get the right kind of rest, and and then there's all that too. Like if they're afforded 3 games off or 3 days off for some reason, they know how much rest to get and how hard to push in practice because they've been there before. And it's those kinds of intangibles that people mean when they say experience, goes a long way.
When you talk about having the experience, Nashville, we record here on Sunday before Game 2 of their series with the Winnipeg Jets, and Nashville losing Game 1, but having seemingly a pretty strong showing. What are we looking for here as we approach Game 2 and the rest of the series?
More of the same of Game 1, actually, because, yes, the result was not what the Predators wanted. And if you just look at the box score, you're like, ugh. Right? I shouldn't say the box score. If you just look at the result, just look at the final score, you're like, wow, did Nashville show up? I mean, 4-1, yikes, But then you look at the actual box score, and you're like, oh, well, they fired 47 shots on goal, and they couldn't solve a hot Hellebuck who had like 168-minute shutout streak going or whatever it was. And they, 160 plus, leave it at that. And, they just couldn't solve him. The guy's in a groove. What are you going to do about it? I mean, 47 shots on goal is tremendous. The first 35 minutes of play, they had 35 shots on goal. Not total in the game. Nashville had 35 shots on goal in the first 35 minutes of the game. Oof. And it just, it was just like, what more can you want? They didn't take a single penalty. This is a team that was the most penalized team in the league in the regular season. They took, certainly, their fair share of penalties against Colorado, and that may have cost them a game or two, at least one game, in the Colorado series. They could have wrapped it up one game quicker, kind of like Winnipeg did against Minnesota, because they wrapped it up in 5 games, not 6. Winnipeg now they were afforded the luxury of having an extra day off or an extra day to practice or whatever it is. And so Nashville, they buried themselves essentially a little bit. I mean, obviously not the end result, but a little bit in the fact they took too many penalties. And here's a game where they came out and they fired 47 shots on goal. They had 35 shots in the first 35 minutes of the game. They didn't take a single penalty, and their goaltender made, he wasn't spectacular, but he was, a B+. And Pecorino on a B+ night should be, should beat the other team at times. Well, this happened one of the times it didn't happen. Winnipeg, it was just, the puck was just going in their direction. That's just how it is. And when you have a hot goaltender in the playoffs, as we all know, that happens every once in a while. So to answer your question, long tail on this kite, if they can play like that every game of this series, they can win it in 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think Wild fans can relate to seeing a hot goaltender beat you in the playoffs, as they can tell you horror stories about Jake Allen last year.
They caught Hellebuck this year, right? Hellebuck he crushed it. But here's the deal: Devin Dubnyk. I watched every game of that series except for I think maybe like a couple periods. Devin Dubnyk deserved a better fate than he got, right? Like, okay, the team were they outmatched by Winnipeg? Okay, yeah, probably, but they certainly could have won 2 or 3 more games because Devin Dubnyk was spectacular through most of this until the last game, of course. It's spectacular until the last game, and to see him face those kind of shot numbers and come out on with the loss was it's got to be heartbreaking for those guys. I think it's the same thing with LA. LA didn't muster much offense, but they certainly shut down. Vegas. I think Quick had like 35, 40, 45 saves a night, and they got swept. Right. So again, if you run into a hot goaltender, that's all it takes.
Yep. And as we've seen, goaltenders play really well and still maybe come out with a loss that maybe speaks a little more of the unpredictability of this postseason as opposed to previous ones. But another thing I wanted to ask you about here was here in the last week, Minnesota making a big front office change. Chuck Fletcher let go. Owner Craig Leopold, previous ties to Nashville being their owner, now doing the process of hiring a new general manager, and the reported top candidate is Paul Fenton, who is the assistant general manager of the Nashville Predators under David Poile. Can you share with us a little bit of what you know about Paul Fenton?
Well, Paul's a great guy. He's always been nice to me. He obviously does the job really well. I mean, he's part of the backbone of this franchise, in the front office department. He's run the draft since 2003, and we all know how great that 2003 draft was. So, he's got a tendency to hang on a little too long to Boston products. I'll put it that way. I don't know if that's on purpose or if that's just just circumstantial because he's from the Boston area, and so and he's got, as he should, he's got tons of contacts up there, especially Boston University, and so you obviously you want to see those guys do well, right? I mean, those are kind of his backyard, but at the same time, you've got maybe a couple of examples, which I can't, get into, but you got a couple of examples of hanging on to guys too long instead of, when there's trade offers for them, or maybe there were no trade offers, but they just decided to keep them in the lineup or keep them with the big club or whatever. And it always seems to revolve around Boston guys. And so, now again, that could be purely circumstantial. I'm not going to hedge my career on it by any means, but it's just interesting how that shakes out. But I would say, though, that if that's the biggest deterrent from Paul Fenton, then I think you've got a heck of a guy if you guys do end up hiring.
One of the strengths, and you kind of brought it up there, of Paul Fenton, that kind of reading up on, is he's been really a top talent evaluator for Nashville and for David Poile, and that's something an area Minnesota could probably use a little bit of an upgrade at, as they've seemingly swung and missed on some draft picks here in the last few years. But I mean, I guess just what if Fenton is indeed the guy? What could Wild fans maybe expect from a draft approach?
It's interesting though, because like so much of the credit for the Predators' success through the drafts, right, comes through the European scouts. I mean, up and down. Pecorine is a great example. He was drafted so late, the round doesn't even exist anymore, and he was noticed by the Finnish scout and said, "Hey, if you guys want to come see this guy play, I got a guy that we should draft." They said, "Oh, okay. When does he play?" Never. Catch him in warm-ups. I mean, things like that, right? Victor Arvidsson was the countless examples of kind of like mid to late round European picks that have panned out, or at least are on the track to pan out in Milwaukee, the AHL affiliate of the Nashville Predators. So I'm not taking anything away from Paul Fenton per se, but I am saying that their scouting department is just tremendous overseas. And so, but at the same time, if he runs the draft, meaning Fenton, he's obviously made some shrewd picks. And so it's a real confidence builder if in fact the Wild do get him, because he can make those shrewd picks, and he can kind of weigh all of the different scouts, not just the North American scouts, but the European scouts. He can learn. He kind of has a resume to build on with all these great players being taken in the mid and late rounds. Like if you, for contrast though, if you look at the Predators' first and second round goaltending draft history, it's horrendous. Jeremy Smith is a guy who was taken in the first round. Pickard was taken in the first round. Brian Finley was taken in the first round. Magnus Hellberg, who I'm still a big fan of because he's awesome, but he didn't pan out in the NHL. He's a second round pick. He was their first round pick. He was their first pick in the second round in 2011. So their early round picks and goaltenders don't really pan out. But for every one of those guys, you've got a franchise defenseman: Seth Jones, Shea Weber, Ryan Suter. All these. Kevin Kline was even a solid defenseman in the National Hockey League, even though he didn't get the notoriety he probably should have. So you've got all these guys, Roman Josi, right? All these guys are just tremendous. Ryan Ellis, the list goes on and on. So, I guess the moral of the story is, Giles, if you stay away from goaltenders, I think you'll be fine.
And so you talked about Fenton being a little bit shrewd when it comes to making some of these draft picks, and his boss David Poile has certainly been shrewd here in recent history and in making some trades. Has Fenton done really any work with these trades that you know of, or has that really just been Poile doing the majority of those work?
Well, I can say that I don't have any direct knowledge or any inside sources that close to the team. Rarely anybody does, because they keep everything pretty close to the vest, to that level of actual trades and this and that. But I will say though that Poile could be his humble self, okay, in fairness, but he is very quick to point out how it is a team effort, meaning him and Fenton and the scouting staff. So if there's a trade to be done, it's him and Fenton and maybe Brian Poile, right, who's like the director of, he's under those two guys. And so if you have, Poile A, Poile B, and Fenton as a team working together, right, for some of these shrewd deals, then Fenton is definitely there. And whether he is the X factor in there, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. But I will say, though, that with that experience of all the trades that Poile has made, especially the big blockbuster ones, Subban for Weber, Johansson for Seth Jones, Forsberg for Erat and Latta, all those, those are all trades that he was there for in the room and signed off on. And so, again, whether he made the decision or not, or he kind of cast the deciding vote or not, however it works in the Predators front office, he was there for all of those. And he was there for trades that didn't go as well either. So he's got all of that experience, even though he has not been a true GM in the National Hockey League. He's as close to a co-GM as it probably is.
Just a couple more questions for Jeremy Gover, our guest here on the Giles and the Goalie podcast. And I guess that it's just kind of our standard questions we love to ask all of our guests here. Ben and I are big hockey jersey fans, or critics, if you will. So do you have a particular hockey jersey that you put above all others, or if you're like us, can't narrow it down to just one, do you have a Mount Rushmore of hockey jerseys?
That I actually own, or that I enjoy, that I like?
Just that you like. I mean, it's...
Okay.
I like
the...
Oh, go ahead.
I'd say I like the St. Louis Blues third from a few years ago, with the arch and I just think it just popped, right? Like that dark, deep blue, the white and that gold, the yellow accent was just really cool. I like that one a lot. My favorite jersey that I own, though, I'll take it that way, is Alexander McGillney was my favorite player growing up. He was playing on NHL 94 every day after school for years. And I said over and over again, you watch sports, right? We did it today. Dubnyk, Jones, Weber, right? Parise, right? Suter. We use their last names to describe these guys. We don't actually call them by their first names. And so, anyways, my point is that I play these games over and over again with my friends and stuff, and I always refer to McGillney as McGillney. Well, over time, I was like, that'd be a really cool first name. And so when I met my wife, and I was my eventual wife, and I was talking to her about names, things like that, kids, if we want kids, McGillney came up, and she liked it. And so when we had a boy, we named him McGillney. So this is a long story for a reason. So what I found was, while we were pregnant, I found a Alexander McGillney 1996 World Cup of Hockey jersey on eBay.
Oh, wow.
That was authentic. Not game worn, but authentic. And I was able to buy it. I'd wanted it for years, and I was never able to afford it, or I could never find them, or whatever it was. And I found it on eBay that while we were pregnant. I was just like, okay, well, I hope it's a boy, because I'm going to buy this jersey. Sure enough, it was a boy, and I wore it. So that's my favorite jersey that I own, because my son's name is on the back of it, basically. But it's an authentic jersey from the 1996 World Cup.
Oh, that's awesome. And then this question is a little bit off the board, but Ben and I love to argue about it at length on podcasts, so we love to ask all our guests and kind of get their varying views. But do you consider soup to be a meal?
A meal. Okay. I'm probably going to skirt the question here, unfortunately. By itself?
Yep, just soup by itself.
No, I do not.
Okay.
With crackers, yes. I don't know why it makes a difference. But if I have a huge thermos, if you will, of tomato soup, and I just drink that is not a meal. But the second I put crackers in it, it's a meal. I don't know why, but that's how I would classify it.
I think that probably falls more to Ben's liking than myself, but I think that's the that's all right. We get a pretty split across the board here on that, so that I think that's the first time at least somebody's mentioned crackers. So there's always a first for everything here. And then last question for you, Jeremy, is: will Preds fans ever quit booing Ryan Suter?
No, I don't think they will. But I will tell you though that I don't think you see it too much in social media if you're the opponent. But there's a large groundswell of quote unquote get over it. It was 6 years ago or whatever, or 7 years, whatever it was. And so, but I'm one to. I don't mind it. Nobody wishes him ill will. I mean, I'm sure you saw on Twitter the amount of support when he announced that he was out with that injury. For the Preds fan base, they all rallied around him and sent him supportive tweets and just hey, we're thinking of you and that kind of thing, because nobody wishes ill will on anybody. And matter of fact, there are some people that really enjoy watching Ryan Suter play. I'm one of them, but I also believe that should be booed in the town because it's become a tradition, and like Rangers fans, right? Still say that Denny Potvin sucks. I mean, that's still a thing. He hasn't played in the NHL in 20 years. So I mean, it's just it's just one of those things that's become a tradition, and it's got a story to it, and it helps educate new fans. Why did they boo that guy? And then you can go through the whole story. Well, he told David Poile he was going to sign, and then he didn't, and then right? I mean, it's just a story. It's just really cool. It's a cool tradition that this fan base has, and honestly, people shouldn't take it too seriously. Either way, whatever side they fall on, they shouldn't take it too seriously.
Well, and you mentioned it's a tradition, and it's one that many that Preds fans have done very well here, and that's been put under the spotlight here in the last couple of playoffs, which I certainly enjoy watching, but I know several Wild fans are pretty against it. So, Jeremy, before I let you go, is there anything you'd like to plug or people can find you on the old internets?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter at Govertime. It's just overtime with the G in front of it, my last name, all one word. You can follow me there, and I tweet out random things about music. Obviously, I promote my stuff that I write for theGameNashville.com, and my interviews on the Predator Radio Network. But mostly, it really is a glimpse into me, if you care about that at all. Like, a lot of people just want news, and I certainly tweet all that because that's my job. I have to. But, I'll throw in a random, like yesterday we were at a minor league baseball game, my family and I were, and my son was there because it was Lego Day, right? And that's why we got him tickets. So we went to Lego Day, and sure enough, I come around the corner, and they have this thing called a graffiti wall, which is where you just put like one-piece Legos, and you can like spell your name and do all kinds of weird stuff on this big like easel-looking thing. And somebody had put Go Preds on it, and so I tweeted that out, and I was like, oh, hey, found it at the Sounds games, and like things like that. Like I try to really let it be as personal as possible so that people get to know who I am. And if you don't like me, that's fine. I certainly don't like everybody either, but it's just cool. It's just cool to have not just a news site, right? Like, so many people are like, okay, well, here's my article. You read this. Okay, great. And they tweet the lines from the morning skate or whatever. But I try to bring a little bit more to the table than that. So you can follow me at Govertime if you're into any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, hopefully our listeners will check you out there. And thanks for joining us here on the show, and hopefully we'll chat with you again down the road.
I am very much looking forward to a 2019 Stanley Cup playoff series between the Predators and the Minnesota Wild.
And I think, if my memory serves me correctly, the Predators are the only Central Division team the Wild haven't played in the postseason.
Oh,
so
there's a stat.
So there you go. Hopefully next year they can check that box off. But Jeremy, thanks again for joining us, and we'll chat with you down the line.
Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again to Jeremy for joining us before Game 2 of the Nashville-Winnipeg series. Obviously, very exciting times in Nashville and pretty busy schedule, so thanks for him for joining us. Ben, now we are in the second round of the NHL playoffs. You and I have obviously planted our flags and our backup teams. You with the Sweet Golden Knights and mine with the Washington Capitals again. If you didn't check out my fan guide on who to cheer for in the second round and beyond of the Stanley Cup playoffs, give that a look on Zone Coverage as well. You get some pros and cons and some Minnesota connections of each team, except for Nashville. I couldn't believe how there was no Minnesota connection to Nashville on the Predators.
Maybe it's a good thing for Fenton.
Yeah. That was literally my Minnesota connection. Paul Fenton is the front runner for the GM position. I looked through their media guide to find anyone in the front office who had a Minnesota connection. Did not.
Yeah.
So that's how dry it was. Ben, any thoughts on the NHL playoffs here? The second round. We're recording on Sunday during the Caps-Penguins Game 2.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught it, but Ovechkin had a absolute sizzler of a goal to kick off this game here.
I did.
But yeah, no, it's been good. It's been good playoffs. I was not thrilled with the conclusion of the Vegas Golden Knights San Jose Sharks game last night because I thought that the game-winning goal in overtime that Vegas scored should have stuck, but maybe that's just me. So I don't know, bro. It's good though. It's always good. It's really good matchups, and A lot of people talked about how good the Winnipeg-Nashville series is going to be, but I kind of like all the matchups for different reasons, and I think that people are underestimating how good the rest of the playoffs could be after the second round. Like, I know there's really good matchups here in the second round, especially Jets-Preds, a lot of people are talking about, but, I mean, never doubt the NHL's conference finals. I mean, those are usually the best two series of the year, almost hands down.
Every round, or every series this round is just incredible, should be really good. And
Yeah.
hopefully it'll make up for a pretty substandard round one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you, noted goalie apologist, didn't think anything should have been called on that goalie interference, but
well, I mean, I'm an objective observer, so.
Yeah, but when it comes to goalies, you tend to favor the goalies. That's why you're called the goalie.
Goal.
What's your bet, sir?
Ah, yes, the bet. Okay, what the hell?
It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
Ben, do we have a weekly wager this week?
Well, we all took, separately without knowing. We both took completely separate teams for all four playoff series. So I think we could center something around that, even though it's going to take, the 2 weeks or whatever it is to settle it. That's a pretty good bet because we literally took exact opposite teams on every series.
Yep.
So
what do we want to wager? Should we just wager a shot that we hate the next time we record an unnamed bar and grill?
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. We've done the food thing almost to death now, so.
Yeah, I may need that said shot after stomaching the food I have coming.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, we will. We'll figure out the shot when that comes. But there you go, a couple week edition weekly wager where we're gonna let the second round play out. Ben has selected. Who did you pick again?
I have the Penguins, the Bruins, the Golden Knights, and the Jets.
All right, and then of course I went exact opposite as you did. So, yeah, please God, let this be the year the Caps win.
Hey, I wouldn't be upset at all if the Capitals won it all.
Like, honestly, when I wrote that guide on zone coverage, I put reasons why you shouldn't cheer for Washington, and I just put they crush your soul every year. And when you get noted Caps fan Chris Long to agree with the few words you used, you've done good. So it just, please let this happen. All right, Ben, we got a mailbag here before we call it a show. The lovely Giles and the Goalie podcast mailbag was opened this week. We're getting in some questions here from our most loyal listeners. First question comes from Alex Schmidt. What is the path for this team to become elite in 3 years? And no, Ben's terrible trades are not that path.
My terrible trades are that path. But other than that, God, I mean, the point of that article was not necessarily those trades specifically, but just kind of, I wanted to throw it out there that it's going to take some wild stuff. Like, no, not pun not intended, but it's going to take some really interesting and ballsy trades to get this team out of where it is, and also some really, maybe some non-conforming drafting, that kind of stuff. It's going to take some bold moves. So I think that was more the point of that article I wrote. I'd really hate trade articles because that kind of speculation just isn't my thing, and I don't think that I should be telling NHL teams who they should trade for with who. But it was more of a exercise in it's going to take something crazy to make this work, and that's really a point that I can stick with more so than the individual trades themselves.
I mean, I guess it kind of falls back to draft and development for me. It may take closer to the end of that 3 years to do it. Say, you draft, a really good player this year, and then you have to wait till the end of the 2019-20 season to get him on board. But I really think that's where it's going to be, and maybe that involves selecting players who maybe slip down in the first round, but they still have really high-end scoring potential. Like, the Wild have passed on some really good players just to go with the safe two-way player. But,
right.
I think that's part of it. But hopefully there's a GM out there who is not overly smart that the new GM can fleece in a trade. But that's never a sure thing to bet on. So it's for me, you got to start drafting and developing players. And the other thing is, don't look, but what happens to the Wild when Devan Dubnyk kind of comes close to the end of his contract? Like, they don't really have a goalie prospect worth anything. That's probably going to be a point of emphasis for the new general manager too, is you kind of got to start looking at that, because Dubnyk has 3 years left, I believe, and say he starts to slip towards the end of that contract, and you don't bring him back. What do you do? That's just kind of a thought there. So,
Absolutely.
Question from Josh: would you bring Tom Vanek back?
In all seriousness, I mean, it depends. I mean, in all seriousness, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but it would have to be the perfect type situation. Like, I think he's still a very worthwhile player to have on your third line and to use a little bit on your power play. Obviously, a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't know if that's going to jive with the plan that the new GM is going to have, so I really don't see it happening.
I love Tom Vanek, obviously, as we've talked about time and time again, but
of course,
I'd say no. I mean, he's really good in the role you just kind of laid out, but he's also trying to be more of a playmaker, which isn't bad, but the Wild have too many of those. They need more of a shooter's mentality, and they don't need a guy who's already been in there, and they need some fresh blood. So,
right.
Next question from Axel Goals. He's got two of them in here, but kind of all under the same banner, so I'll kind of put them both out there as one.
Sure.
He asks, is Coyle, or I guess this person asks, is Coyle most likely to be traded, and what does Boudreau think of Coyle? Well, I think if you get Bruce Boudreau, off, or maybe even on the record, he'll probably tell you Charlie Coyle didn't have a good year, and you need a lot more from him. And I think he's very much a prime candidate to be moved this summer, just to kind of give him a fresh start. And he's got probably one of the more movable contracts on this roster.
Yep.
So it's hard to see him back in Minnesota next year. And as you said on the pod last week, he was probably the most likely person to have played their last game in a Wild uniform.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I think it's pretty. I don't want to say the writing's on the wall, like it's some kind of thing that has been coming for a long time, because I don't know that it has. But I mean, Coyle is a guy that he probably has enough value with other NHL teams to where you could move him. And as you said, that contract, I mean, it's very movable. It's a very movable contract. So I don't know. I think you never know, but I mean, anything better than 50-50 shot, I think, is silly, but I think there's a very legitimate 50-50 shot that Coyle's gone this summer, which is saying something. I mean, there's not often, especially a guy who hasn't voiced his displeasure with the team or anything to that effect. Like, that's saying something that a guy like that would get moved, that just out of, because usually those things are out of nowhere.
Yeah. And then the last one we have from Trent Nelson asking about free agency. I guess just kind of maybe getting our thoughts on who maybe the Wild should be interested in free agency. I don't know if I've looked further down the list than Mr. Tavares, but that's something we'll kind of get into, over the next, few weeks as we start to look at, what the Wild will do once the playoffs end and the offseason really kicks off.
Yeah, I think that, there isn't a whole lot out there, to be honest. And so that makes it kind of tough because it's like, well, they can only do so much with what they've got. And I don't think free agency is going to be a big thing for them this year, to be honest. Like, I think this year, if they're going to add new players, it's probably going to be through trade. And, maybe they make a trade that frees up some salary space and gets them as a player in free agency. Otherwise, I think we're both kind of in the camp. We want them to bring back Zucker and Dumba. We think they're part of the solution. And keeping them is going to be important, and that's going to cost a lot of money as well. So I don't see the Wild doing a whole lot in free agency at all. But, trades could happen. Who knows? Things could work out.
Yeah. All right, that's the mailbag for this week. Thank you to everyone for sending in the questions. And that can probably wrap it up for us this week. Ben, any final thoughts?
Sure. No, I just think, with the GM search going on, like, I don't think we need to get too crazy and get our panties in the bunch over anything or get too down or too up or too down about anything necessarily. I think just kind of let it play out and we'll see how it goes and try to have some confidence in the candidate if it's warranted, and we'll see what happens. It should be exciting. A lot of people have waited a long time for this to happen, and a lot of Fletcher haters have waited a long time for this to happen. So just kind of enjoy the excitement that is the unknown.
Yeah. Final thought, maybe in the coming weeks, look for some news that we will be doing some sort of draft party. Maybe keep the first round of the draft on that Friday night open.
Mm-hmm.
Might do so with some friends. So I'll just kind of hint at that and look for that down the road at some point. But hopefully we can get something going, have some people out and have a good time and watch the Wild have a first-round pick this year.
Woo! Well, hey, let's pump the brakes here. We don't know that. Just saying.
All right. Ben can be followed on Twitter at Ben Remington. I can follow myself on Twitter at Giles Farrell. Our podcast has a Twitter account at GATG Wild Podcast. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. This show is part of a website called Zone Coverage. That is where Ben and I write, zonecoverage.com/wild. Or go to zonecoverage.com for all your Minnesota sports. You can find this otherwise fine podcast on iTunes. Please leave us an iTunes rating or subscribe. Helps boost the show immensely. You can find us on SoundCloud, on Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. However you listen to podcasts, we are very likely there. If there is a place we are not and you would like us to be, reach out to us and we'll see if we can make that happen. We also have a YouTube channel. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with the YouTube channel this offseason. Obviously, we will probably return to the game previews and recaps next year, but as for doing anything in the offseason with the YouTube channel, haven't really figured that out yet. But thank you to those who have subscribed and watched our stuff on the YouTube. I know it's painful sometimes, but we did try to have fun with it. And I think I got it all. So for our Seattle correspondent, Ben Remington, this is Giles Frill signing out, and we will catch you again next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.